Okay, technical glitch. Let's try this again. Hopefully the intro plays. And welcome everyone to another adventure on Writing Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael Koff, and tonight's guest is a very special guest, and I am so grateful to have him on. I had the privilege and honor to not only MC him at a conference, but to listen to his presentation. And I have to say, you all are in for a huge treat. He has so much knowledge and is so nice. And so I'm going to stop singing his praises and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself to you all. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the one, the amazing, super informative Samuel Chong.
Hi, thank you, Michael, for having me here. As you mentioned, I'm a lawyer in California, and also I've been a certified court interpreter and a Chinese translator in California. But my main interest is the esoteric knowledge and also the disclosure that we are not alone in the universe. I've been researching and investigating a lot of the paranormals, including the Bermuda Triangle, ghosts, and who and how the Great Pyramid was built. A lot of interesting things that people have been wondering about. But I found the answers through this book, A Theory About Prophecy, which I think connects all the dots and answers all the questions that you may have.
That's really cool, and thank you for sharing that. And is the book still in print, or is it one of those where they've taken it off the shelves because it's too informative and they don't want the information getting out there?
Well, it is still in print in the US and also in the Western world, but in China, when it was published, the government removed a few sentences because of the censorship over there. And a lot of people normally don't want this book to be read by the people, by the mass, because it actually advocates peaceful, nonviolent resistance against the tyrannies in the world.
Which is much needed right now. And I know you most likely have been asked this many times, but if you'll indulge me, I'm going to ask anyway. How does a lawyer and a court interpreter get into the esoterics and all these topics? Was it just you stumbled on the book, or did you have an interest before the book?
I actually had an interest before the book. I had a fascination on everything unknown, including the things that I mentioned, the Bermuda Triangle, the pyramid, and life after death, near-death experiences, reincarnation, and also some of the things that are not explainable. For example, I've been researching people who have ESPs, extrasensory perceptions, or special abilities to see through a person's body and to predict the future. And I did a lot of research on that, and I think this book answers a lot of the questions. And also, as a lawyer, I want to really convey such messages to my colleagues or my peers who really need such a spiritual message, because they actually want to earn a lot of money and make a living out of the people. But I think um, the purpose of life is not financial, not materialistic, but spiritual. We should follow the teachings of Christ to be spiritual, as well as the Ten Commandments in the Old Testament of the Bible. And because when we die, we do not take away any of the wealth that we accumulated. We take away the spiritual lessons.
That is beautifully said. And with that, I'm kind of curious because I don't think we covered this in your presentation at the conference, but what is your thoughts on who did build the pyramids and how?
Well, it was actually built by people who had knowledge, ancient knowledge, actually from ancient civilizations that disappeared. We did have two continents that existed in the ancient past, one of which was Atlantis, and the other was Lemuria. Lemuria existed in the Pacific Ocean, and Atlantis existed in the Atlantic Ocean. And it was a very wise and learned person from Atlantis called Thoth who built the Great Pyramid in Egypt. He was not a god as what the Egyptians now believe. He was just a regular person, but he had the knowledge to use anti-gravitational technologies and supersonic vibratory systems to cut the huge stones in a very precise manner. He was able to align the stones precisely so that the pyramid was used actually as an energy center, because it was able to capture the cosmic and terrestrial energies. The pharaohs, ancient pharaohs of Egypt, knew how to use it correctly, so they sat in the king's chamber and meditated and communicated with people on different planets. Um, and also, they were able to use it to make rain, as archaeologists agree. About 10,000 years ago, the Nile region was pretty fertile with a lot of rainfall. And this is actually one of the reasons why there were a lot of rains in that region in the ancient past, because they were able to use the pyramid to make rains through projecting a kind of energy into the sky so that clouds would be able to form.
Do you think Thoth had ET technology that allowed them to build this structure the way it is? And my other question is, because it was built by Thoth, is that why there's no hieroglyphs inside the pyramid?
The first question, we all came from different planets originally. For example, the blacks and the yellows came from a planet called Baccaratini, according to the book Theoba Prophecy. The Caucasians came afterwards, and the ancestors of the Polynesians came later and landed on the continent of Lemuria, and then they migrated. Some of them migrated to Atlantis, and Thoth was actually one of the people originally from Lemuria who was able to build the pyramid in Egypt. And to your second question, I think people need to realize that the pyramid was actually used as a tool to capture the cosmic terrestrial energies, and not to commemorate anyone else, or used as a tomb for the pharaohs. So as a tool, you don't really need a lot of writings on the wall because it's just a tool. People knew how to use it, and there's no need to give any instructions. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why there are no heligraphs on the walls. But what you said could be correct as well. It could be another reason.
Fair enough. And the only thing when I hear like it was built by humans, that makes me question this is the fact it's aligned to like Orion's belt and the Orion constellation, and we couldn't, in my understanding of ancient civilizations, and as I said, this is my personal bias, they didn't have information like we do to see the stars and to map it above on the ground. So, as above, so below. So, how did these pyramids end up lining up with the constellation?
Well, the people, the builders in the past had the knowledge. They knew how the stars were aligned, and they were able to use these ultrasonic vibratory systems to cut the stones, but also use anti-gravitational technologies to align the stones in a very precise manner. So it's actually, if you think about it, it's actually pretty easy to do once you neutralize gravity. So you can move the stones to whichever location that you want them to be. So I think, and they definitely knew where the stars were, like how the stars were aligned, um, because back then they observed the stars and the planets, and they definitely had the knowledge how to make the pyramid align with the stars.
Okay, that makes more sense actually. And it kind of goes into also the theory that they say water from the Nile was pumped into the bottom of the Great Pyramid to create energy. And so, since they diverted the Nile away to build another temple, it seems like the energy went dormant. Is that true in your viewpoint, or is that just something that coincidentally happened?
I think back then, Nile River was actually in that region and providing a source of energy to the Great Pyramid, and also the other pyramids too. The the pyramid structure, is a structure that can capture the energies. And also, if you know the recent news, like a few months ago, when they discovered that there's a subterranean structure beneath the pyramid, you may make the inference that that structure beneath the ground is a structure that captures the terrestrial energies. And then above ground, you have the pyramid structure that captures the cosmic energies. So with the combination of the energies, um, if a person knows how to use it correctly, then that person would be able to sit in the king's chamber and meditate and concentrate and to project the thoughts through the top of the pyramid into the cosmic realm and to really communicate with people on different planets. This is actually how they did that in the past. And I think among other knowledge or facts, people can make the inference that there are a lot of things that we can uncover, either from the pyramid, but also or from the Sphinx, because there are chambers beneath the Sphinx that can be opened. And according to Edgar Casey, as you know, and also according to other psychics, Michel de Marquet, the author of the book The Uber Prophecy, also says that the ETs tell him that once the three chambers beneath the Sphinx are opened, then everything will be known. But they only can be opened when we are ready. We are not ready spiritually yet.
I agree with that, and I do hope the day comes soon, though. And an interesting theory that I've heard tossed around a lot is Egypt was created by survivors of Atlantis. Do you think that it is survivors, or do you think actually Egypt was a part of Atlantis and that the continent was bigger than we thought it was?
Well, Atlantis was a continent in the Atlantic Ocean, and Egypt was actually created by some of the survivors from Atlantis. Some other survivors went to Greece. So if you look at the Greek language, it's actually the language very similar to the language used in Atlantis. So there, but unfortunately, the continent sunk into the ocean, and since the burning of the Library of Alexandria, a lot of the knowledge was lost. Actually, when Moses was around, there were still schools that taught esoteric knowledge, knowledge that can help people to perform magic such as the magic performed by the magicians of the pharaohs of Egypt, as documented in the Old Testaments of the Bible. But afterwards, the knowledge was gradually lost. So by the time that Jesus was born, basically on Earth, very few people knew or had the knowledge to perform magic. So there's a lot of interesting facts that people can learn from that book. It's fascinating.
And you raise a good, interesting point with the Atlantean survivors going to Egypt and Greece because in history, Greece in the Ptolemaic age ruled Egypt, but they seemed to get along. It wasn't like a major conflict and they were constantly, you know, jarring and trying to fight and get freedom. It was like they just accepted it. Then when it was over, they're like, okay, we're back to just Egyptians. And so could that be why? Because they had that common ancestry connection that they were like, okay, we're going to be partly Greek now. Cool.
Yes, that's actually one of the reasons. The other reason was that people on the continent of Lemuria and Atlantis were highly spiritual and peace-loving people. So they did not want to have wars. And Thoth, actually, when he felt that they were ready spiritually and materialistically ready, this is the reason he built the Great Pyramid in 9 years' time. As you see, only when people were spiritually ready and technologically ready were they able to build a pyramid. And this is the reason why when in later years when the people in Latin America tried to imitate in building the Great Pyramid, they were not able to do that because they lost the technology, and they were not really spiritually ready to build a pyramid as great as the Great Pyramid in Egypt. So as you see, the later years, the pyramids were not as great as the ones that they built before.
Okay, and I have an interesting question about Lemuria. If we can sidestep over to the Pacific for a moment, and that is, I hear it referred to as Lemuria, but also Mu. And so, is there a difference between the two, or why is it under two different names?
It's actually the same. It's just the two names that people call the same continent. Actually, on the continent of Lemuria, there existed a very, very successful and spiritual civilization in which there was no money. Money did not exist on the continent of Lemuria or Mu. People just grabbed whatever they needed from the marketplace because no one took advantage of each other. And they had a lot of great technologies using nuclear energy to power lamps or lights. They also knew how to use anti-gravitational technologies to build a pyramid that's 3 times as great as a pyramid in Egypt. They also built the moas, the statues on Easter Island. So this is why when you go to west of Chile, go on that island, you're going to see that even with modern technology, it will be very, very challenging and difficult to duplicate the moas, the statues on Easter Island. That's actually one of the remnants of the ancient civilization of Lemuria.
So, do you feel the Moab statues are they deities, or do you think they're statues of actual Lemurians?
There are actually statues to commemorate the ETs from Theoba or Jehovah, this in which the author Michel Marquet encountered. Because in the ancient past, as I mentioned, the people on Lemuria, they were highly spiritual. They were ready to make the contact with extraterrestrials. And the extraterrestrials were in frequent contact with the people of Lemuria. So they actually built the statues, the moas, to commemorate or to remember the ETs that were in contact with them and actually help them to colonize parts of India. So this is why when you look at some of the paintings in India, you see a lot of gods and goddesses who appear to be on chariots of fire, or maybe they appear to be either not male or not female. They're kind of like gender neutral. So there's a reason for that. If you read the book, you're going to realize the reason for that.
Okay, I'm definitely going to get this book. And one thing that I'm curious your viewpoint and opinion of is there's a lot of talk about Atlantis and the theories of why it sank. But when you ask people about Lemuria, they just say it sank. Why is Atlantis more like controversially sought than Lemuria?
One of the reasons was that on the continent of Atlantis, there existed a race that's the Caucasian race, and there are a lot of legends and stories on how what happened to that continent. On Lemuria, it's actually sunk into the ocean earlier than Atlantis due to a natural disaster, earthquake, in which the author actually went to the past and saw actually what happened. And it's purely a disaster that they did not really anticipate. And you can read the book, but what's more interesting that the book also explains why there's a ET base on the far side of the moon, because when the people from a different planet try to migrate to Earth and land on Lemuria, they actually encountered resistance from the Chinese people. So they retreated back to the far side of the moon and built ET bases, and so that they could actually migrate their people little by little, step by step, so this is why some people say there were ET bases on the far side of the moon. Yes, there are still artificial structures, and also there were people who lived on Mars about 1.35 million years ago. There were life forms on Mars, indeed. But what happened was that Mars, the core of Mars, cooled down. So geologists and also astronomers agree that when the core of the planet cools down, it will no longer have the magnetic shield that can capture the atmosphere. So the magnetic forces will no longer be able to capture the atmosphere. So Mars basically became a desert, a planet with no atmosphere anymore. So this is why life no longer exists on Mars. But it used to have life forms. And Earth, as you know, the core of Earth is really hot. the movement of the core, the liquid form in the core is the cause of the magnetic shield of Earth. This is why we have the atmosphere, but Mars doesn't have it anymore.
So with our core moving around, and they're saying like the northern point geo or magnetic north is moving much quicker now. Does that mean our core is cooling down and our atmosphere is going to shift, or does, in your opinion, the fact that the cores alternate, they do that naturally, and we're just kind of fear mongering that it's going to be total devastation?
It definitely shifts, but the ultimate demise of Earth is not going to be the cooling down of the core. Well, I mean, the people on Earth is we are going to be facing another catastrophe, actually several. One which is that we probably, if we don't change the ways how we live nowadays, we're going to destroy it ourselves. That's the most danger that we're facing nowadays. We need to be more spiritual. And the other danger is that our moon, is actually moving um, sooner or later that is going to strike Earth. And this is actually proven by Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist. When Joe Rogan asked him about a question about the moon, and he says that very few people talks about it, but the moon is actually going to hit Earth sooner or later. And this is actually the same thing is told to us by the ETs from Thiuba. They tell Michel de Marquet that in about 200,000 years or so, the moon will hit Earth. And then if we don't migrate to a different planet, that'll be the end of the human life on Earth. So before the core of Earth cools down, we are going to be facing several natural disasters.
Wow, that's actually making me think a lot about things, because I know the moon is artificial and was placed to help balance the planet, but I never thought about its orbit decaying and eventually hitting the planet, and so that that is interesting. Wow, I got to think about that. And one question you kind of mentioned, how in China things are more censored, probably, than they are here, even though there's a lot of censorship here. How is it, when there's a sighting in China? Does the government say, like they do here, "Oh, you saw a weather balloon. That wasn't anything," or are they more open about the UFOs?
Well, it depends on the period of time that you're talking about. In the early 1990s and the early 2000s, the Chinese government was actually quite open to this kind of phenomena. The official media reported on few sightings and also close encounters with the extraterrestrials. And they are actually well documented, and there are investigators who performed psychological examinations on a person who claimed that to have contact with the ETs, also lie detector tests as well. And the official media reported on this, but after a few years, in the last 15 years or so, the government became very, very quiet, and they don't want to report anything out of the extraordinary, or they don't want to report anything that's not in the textbook. So the attitude of the Chinese government changed. But there are a few sightings uh, publicized and well known to the Chinese public that occurred in the early 2000s and 1990s. Um, there was actually one well documented Roswell crash of China, and in which they actually um, recovered a ET vehicle that crashed in China, and one ET survived, and the other died. And but the military of the Chinese military took the vehicle and the ET body, and the other ET who was still alive, and then the researchers in China never heard back from the government. So there are incidents in China which were well publicized by the ufologists in China. But recently, this book, The Theoba Prophecy, got into China as a science fiction. But as you know, people know that it has to be classified as a science fiction in order to be published in China. The readers know that a lot of the readers know that it's not a science fiction. It's actually pretty. Um, there are a lot of detail that can be verified, and I think in that sense, the Chinese public is well ahead of the American public in learning about the ETs. Um, I say that because, you know, in the U.S., people wonder about the reverse engineered results of the ET crafts that crashed in New Mexico or elsewhere. They crashed, indicating that their technologies are not that advanced. Um, the ETs who got in touch with Seattle Machado Marquet, their spacecraft did not and will never crash on Earth. As you read the book, you're going to discover that there are different kinds of ETs in our Milky Way galaxy. There are the ones who are very, very advanced, such as the Theobans, and there are the ones who are not so advanced, like the Grays, whose spacecraft crashed. So, in that sense, if you really think about it, the Americans are learning about the Greys from the Greys, but the Chinese are learning from the Theobans. The Chinese public is learning from the Theobans. So the Chinese public is learning from the masters. And the American public, or maybe some of us, only learn from our peers. So you see the difference. So I've been trying to help the American public to become more aware of the masters of the ETs, and to learn from the ETs whose spacecraft did not and will never crash on Earth.
So I wonder, is that why perhaps in optics China is late to the space race? Where we had in the 60s and 70s and 80s US versus USSR, the Soviet Union, which is now Russia, for the newer generation who won't understand what we're talking about when we say USSR. And because we were learning and backwards engineering from the Greys, that we raced to get into space faster, where China was like, yeah, you guys go ahead and race out, and you guys are going to have all these issues, and we're going to go into space the right way. And that's why it took longer for people to hear about China entering space.
Well, if you noticed, I did not say the Chinese government is learning from the masters. I'm saying the Chinese public is learning from the masters. The Theobans are not working with the Chinese government. There's a difference between the government and the people. And I emphasize that because the government is doing their own thing. And if you look at the great revolutions of the world, they all came from the people, the mass, because the revolutions will only be able to last longer when they have the support of the people. So I say that the Chinese public is learning from the masters. I'm saying that the Chinese public, the Chinese people, are gradually waking up. I'm trying to encourage the American public to wake up as well and not to be dwelt on the graves because their spacecraft crashed. The Americans are not really learning from the masters, I mean the public. So if you really want to succeed in really making a great change of anything, you really should take the grassroots approach to really have the people to initiate any of the changes that you like to see, not relying on a specific politician. A lot of people give a lot of high hopes to Bill Clinton to disclose that the government was in touch with the ETs, but he didn't do anything. Hillary didn't do anything, and the Bush family didn't do anything, and then
I think we froze. Let's see if we can get him back.
you still hear me? Okay,
Okay, you're back. You froze for a moment.
I see.
The last thing we heard was that Bill Clinton and Hillary didn't do anything, and then you froze.
Yeah, I mean, we should not rely on the politicians. If you really want to make certain changes, you should really focus on the people because the politicians rely on the people, and we should really take the grassroots approach and fundamentally make the change that's initiated by the people.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I'm visually like replaying in my mind the movie The Martian. I don't know if you saw that one,
No.
but we send a team up and onto Mars, and they end up leaving one Martian behind, and he has to learn how to survive. And America can't build a shuttle to get there fast enough. And China's scientist calls up and says, "We got a shuttle you can use, and we can retrofit it." And it's interesting because I think it was like our scientists working with the Chinese scientists, and they were able to get up there and rescue the astronaut. And when I hear you saying, it's not the government, it's the people, I kind of have to sit there and wonder, where do the scientists fall? Do they fall in the category like here in America where they answer to the higher up, government agencies to control what they can research and not research? Or do they have more freedom over there?
In China, the astronauts and the scientists, they don't have any freedom. They're protected by the government. So they have to listen to the instructions of the government. But I really want to emphasize, I don't know if you know this, but if there's a disclosure, the Israeli Space Agency will have to be involved. And there's a reason for that. Because we all came from different planets originally. And the Hebrews came from a different planet. This is why in the Old Testament of the Bible, they were the chosen people. And if you look at nowadays, if you look at some of the things about the Jewish people, you're going to see that they're really unique. They account for only about 0.2% of world population, but 22% Nobel Prize winners are Jewish people. They excel in the fields that they go into, in the business field, in the legal field, in the entertainment field. So they're statistically significant. Like if you look at some of the statistics, the Ashkenazi Jews in the U.S. they live 5 years longer than the average Caucasians in the U.S. So this is actually statistically significant, and there's a reason for that. Because when you read the Old Testament of the Bible, you're gonna read people who lived 800 years or 900 years of age, and gradually their longevity got reduced, and there's a reason for that. If you read the book Theoba Prophecy, you're gonna know the reason. You're gonna know why the Hebrews were the chosen people. You're gonna know why Jewish people are so unique, and you're gonna know like a lot of the things in the Bible, such as who really destroyed the two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, and why they were destroyed. You're gonna realize who really parted the sea for Moses, and who really gave the mannas to the Hebrews to eat during Exodus. You're gonna realize like the Star of Bethlehem was actually a space vehicle of the ETs. It's actually proven by astronomers, verified by the astronomers in China, because they saw a star that remained in the sky for 70 days. Because the Chinese astronomers kept a very good record of the changes in the sky or in the stars. Actually, I wrote an article about that, and you're going to discover a lot of things that you really you probably would want to know.
No, that's true. And the one thing that I'm curious your thoughts on too is, as we're talking about disclosure and everything, is a lot of people are saying like religion will not survive the disclosure movement because there's so many, I don't want to say lies, but disinformation or misrepresented information that's come through the religious orders over the centuries, that when disclosure comes, that's all going to be revealed. And it's like, I feel like it's going to be humanity is going to turn their back on it. Do you think that's the future of what's going to happen with religion and disclosure, or are people going to find a happy medium with it?
I think it really depends on how the current organized religions transform themselves. If they are insisting on being the pastors or the priests that people have to listen to, then they're probably not going to survive, because actually religions is actually a curse on earth. It's actually the number 4 danger on earth according to the ETs. Number 1 being money, number 2 politicians, number 3 journalists and drugs, number 4 religions. And we should be spiritual but not religious, because organized religions tend to serve their own interests. We should be spiritual, meaning that we should follow the 10 Commandments of Moses and the teachings of Christ, and to be kind with one another, and to really be compassionate and love one another. And also during the compilation or canonization of the Bible, certain concepts such as reincarnation were removed from the ancient scriptures. Because if you really do a lot of research, you're going to realize that medical doctors, like scientists like Dr. Ian Stevenson, studied people who remember their past lives, people who can prove reincarnation, the existence of reincarnation. Dr. Michael Newton, Dr. Brian Weiss, and Dr. Raymond Moody all are medical doctors. They all can show that reincarnation exists. The Indians and the Chinese people believe in reincarnation. The Westerners in the US and Europe, they don't, because of the Christianity, the Christian religion, and because they removed the concept of reincarnation from the Bible. This is why people in the Western world don't believe in that. So if there's a disclosure of the existence of the ETs, then it really depends how the religious organizations um, respond to such news. If they become like the roles of mentors or teachers, encouraging people to be more spiritual and to follow the teachings of Christ, then they're able to survive. And I think people need to realize that Jesus and Christ existed in the past, and they were spiritual masters, and we should follow their teachings for sure. Um, but religion is a curse.
I agree because it, from my research and personal studies, I found that metaphysics and spirituality are like unity, where religions are like you're either Catholic or you're Roman Catholic or you're Protestant or you're there was no unity. Everybody was fighting against each other, and it's like, what is going on here? You know, and they would be like fighting over the most smallest detail of a story and being like, no, we cannot get behind you because of this. And it's like, so don't. But why, tell people like Jewish are like, you got to marry Jewish. Catholics are like, no, you can't get along with Lutherans. I've never really understood why they want such division.
Yeah. This is why, like, if you really want to know why there are so many wars and divisions in the world, there's another book that I would recommend you to check out. It's called 334 Lies. Uh, I'll just leave it there because it's a very disturbing book. Talks about how the author of that book became the highest degree chair of a secret society that was founded in Germany. And I used to think that's the Illuminati, but actually that secret society is actually more dangerous than the Illuminati. They have psychic abilities, but they use their abilities in the wrong way. They had the knowledge using a specific form of astrology and numerology to see the past and predict the probability of the future. They manipulated politicians and business leaders without them knowing that. So it's a very dangerous organization that the author revealed. But that's a different story. But it's probably too advanced for most people. But it's a very disturbing book.
Sounds like it. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about, where and how you feel disclosure will happen versus how you would want disclosure to happen.
I think, given the fact that most people want to hear or they want to hear that the ETs are a threat. I mean, a lot of the military defense companies, they would like to portray the ETs as a threat so that they can make more money, get more money from the defense budget, from the government. I think it's probably going to go into that in that direction, posing ETs as a threat in that way. But I'm working on different direction, just to really empower people with the right knowledge that ETs are not a threat to us. And I think we need everyone to join the force and to awaken the people, enlighten the people, so that they can have the right knowledge. Because if the ETs really want to invade us, they would have done that long time ago. They wouldn't have to wait until now. And I think the defense companies need a lot of money now, so they want to post that as a way to do it.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I have an interesting theory. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts on it would be, and that is like Lemuria and Atlantis. It was recorded they sank into the ocean, but yet we can't find definitively where they are. So, is it possible that instead of sinking and being destroyed, that they somehow energetically shifted from our level of the earth and are like now in like Agartha or inner earth, and they left the main planet surface because, like you were pointing out, we had gone away from peace and spirituality. So, to preserve their way of life, they left. Could that be more accurate of what happened to both of those cultures?
I definitely hope so, that they survived the catastrophes. However, it's very unlikely that they moved their entire civilization to elsewhere on Earth. Uh, there are archaeological findings or structures in Latin America that puzzle people nowadays. And also the fact that the ocean, the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, are oceans are the least explored areas on Earth. Um, I think if we really explore the bottom of the ocean, Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean, we will be able to find evidence of the ancient civilizations. Um, it's just that we haven't really fully explored the bottom of the oceans yet. I definitely would hope that there are people who survived the catastrophes. I have not found any verifiable evidence on that yet.
And I'm curious your thoughts, going a little bit deeper with that is, and pointing out as far as we're told, we're not exploring the oceans and we're focusing in space. Why do you think that is, in your opinion? Why wouldn't we want to explore our planet more and learn, if there's, places we could live like in the ocean and, expand our horizons that way? Why are we so driven to go into space instead of the ocean?
Because everyone can see space at night or during daytime. Not everyone can see the ocean because unless you live in a beach or near the beach area, you probably won't be able to see the sea or the ocean. But everyone can see the sky, so that's why it fascinates more people than the sky fascinates more people than the ocean.
And I always find it interesting, like when we talk about our Star Trek future, they're like space, the final frontier. And then I stumbled on a show, Sequest, and they're like the true final frontier. And it's like, yeah, it really, surprised me that, we forgot about our oceans. And so I wonder sometimes, do they know what's in the oceans and that's why we're not going and exploring, because they don't want what's in the oceans to be known, versus if we go into space, we it's like, well, we they can cover up more of what's in space cuz not everybody has the technology to go into space. But as you said, like people can go in the ocean. So if you say there's a structure here, anybody really could go and park a boat over it and send something down and look and be like, there is a structure. But maybe they don't want that.
I think technology is actually one of the obstacles, the limiting factor, because you have to have the technology to bear the pressure of the water in deep ocean. So, in order to discover any of the evidence of ancient civilizations, it's actually, I don't know. I don't have the answer actually.
That's okay. It's all theory because we can surmise, sending a remote camera unmanned vehicle down and can explore that way. And so, but that costs money and costs money to go into space. And so it's like, yeah, it kind of in your mind, you're like, it's a 20/20 or 50/50, which way you want to go. But yeah, it just, and I wonder, could the ETs be behind also why we don't look at certain parts of our oceans versus there are certain spots in space we don't look because of the ETs. Could that be why?
Um, I know there are UFOs or UAPs in the ocean too, and because water is really not a barrier for their technology, um, and also their locations in space that they come in and get out of Earth. If you read the books written by David Paulides, the Missing 411 series of books, you're going to realize that there are portals or warps in space that the ETs take advantage of, and then they come in and get out of Earth from those portals. It's actually also mentioned in the book Theoba Prophecy. So those locations are also the locations which people gone missing, who have gone missing, like in the Bermuda Triangle, where the planes and ships disappear, and also in the national parks in the U.S. and Canada, where hikers or climbers they disappear or vanish in very strange circumstances because there are warps like ribbons float in space. They move around, and then but the ETs know the locations of the portals, so this is why they come in and get out of Earth using the portals. And this is why when you observe space or the sky, you can see that the UAPs frequently appear and disappear uh, at a specific location in the sky. It's actually proven by a lot of the observers. So I think there are a lot of things that people can uncover.
Very true. And I'm kind of curious with ET technologies if, we're starting to make more advancements now in how we get into space. If there's ETs behind this and helping us, and if that's true, oh, I had this thought in my head and I just went blank on it. So,
Let me answer your question. Okay,
yeah,
yeah. If the ETs are helping us, then it's only the helps from the grace or the primitive or not so advanced ETs that are helping us. I'll just give you an analogy. Like if you're in a school, then you got stuck answering a question, a mathematical question or problem, then you're probably likely to receive help from your peers, your students, your classmates. Um, and this is like when you go home, you probably wouldn't receive your help from your parents, because if the parents are wise and knowledgeable, because the parents know that if they just provide direct assistance, just giving you the answers, then you're not going to learn as much. They're probably going to give you some general directions and ways for you to really solve the problems on your own, because that's a way for you to learn. So similarly, the advanced ETs are not going to give us direct assistance in developing such technologies. It's the peers, the Greeks who are our peers, who may have agreed with the US government, uh, forming some kind of exchange or agreement, and to provide certain technologies to the military. But I wouldn't say that I don't think the advanced ETs are providing such technologies. For another reason, would be that we are not spiritually sufficient to receive their assistance, because if they provide such technologies to us, we're just probably going to have another war and destroy ourselves. It's really sad that people are just like that way.
It is sad, and I agree. And I know we're at a little like a minute over the hour. Do you have time to talk some more, and or do you need to go? I want to be
Yeah,
respectful of your time.
yeah, we can extend. We can, yeah, continue.
Okay. One thing I'm curious, when we're talking like ET technologies and that, are being talked about coming, like I'm sure you've heard the term medbed, which is supposed to be quantum holographic interface, which is supposed to heal our bodies and restore us to our normal lifespan, not the short lifespan we've been created to. Is this, in your opinion and your thoughts, beneficial ET technology, or is this a ET technology that's going to turn around and be another means of control and keeping us from expanding our spirituality?
First of all, I don't have enough information about medbeds, like specific verifiable information. From what you described, the technology is definitely possible to achieve, because my parents are Chinese doctors, and Chinese medicine is actually based on the human energy fields. If you can really improve on the human energy field, the chakras and the auras, you're definitely going to heal the body much better than the conventional drugs that people take. So the technology is definitely possible. Will the ETs directly give the technologies to us? I don't know. If they are really trying to help us, they would probably provide the knowledge to us, so that we can develop medbed ourselves uh, through the knowledge through the knowledge that they provide to us, or maybe kind of insinuate to us. I just don't think that they would just provide a medbed and for us to reverse engineer. Um, Longevity is another issue, because um, the longevity of the people depends uh, on the spiritual development of the people. So if you're highly spiritual, then you can live longer. If you're not, then you are not going to live longer. So this is just a fact. And I can elaborate a little bit more on that, but I think it's useless for a non-spiritual person to live more than 100 years or so, because it's not to the benefit of the revolution of the soul, or the fear, or the spiritual development of that person. You have to really uh, leave the physical body in order to uh, understand the spiritual lessons that you need to learn in your next reincarnation. So what happens is that when a person's astral body leaves the physical body, there's going to be a life review process. Everything that he or she did in the lifetime will be shown to that person as a holographic film. Um, and everything will be felt by that person, not only her own feelings, such as pain or happiness, but also the people who interacted with that person. So it's like a holographic experience. Uh, and then, since you're going to feel the pains of others, or the happiness or the appreciation of the others, you're going to know what kind of things you did correctly or incorrectly. So that's when you decide what kind of spiritual lessons you're going to learn in your next lifetime. So it would not be beneficial if you just keep living on Earth for maybe a few hundred years or so. It's probably not the best or the most efficient approach.
That makes total sense. And I'm curious with your background and your studies and cultural background. I don't know if you're into the astrology or not, but what is, in your opinion, as we're kind of dipping our toe somewhat in disclosure, that it happens that this year is the year of the fire horse? Is there significance to that and kind of guidance and, leading to the more spiritual side through the fact that we're in the year of the fire horse, or does that just coincidentally just happen and they're not really related?
Astrology works for sure, according to the ETs. I mean, but not in the way that most people think. So we have electromagnetic fields or electrons on Earth, um, and the stars and planets influence the electrons or electromagnetic fields of electrons. And so when a person is born, or when like a specific moment of time uh, occurs, there are certain aspects or tendencies of the electrons affected by the stars, the locations of the stars and the planets. So it's the aspects or tendencies of the electromagnetic fields of the electrons that tend to have specific influence on the actions of the people on Earth. So that's how astrology works. And I definitely hope that there's going to be a disclosure this year. And I've been pushing so hard for people to read this book, Theoba Prophecy, because it talks about the author's encounter with highly advanced ETs, the ETs who are more advanced than the Greys, the ETs who have been watching over us throughout history of mankind on Earth, as documented in the Bible, the Old Testaments and New Testaments of the Bible, and I think they have been acting as our mentors, helping us, giving us nudges from time to time to develop our spirituality. And you can read this book as a science fiction or as a fantasy novel. It's a very good read, and it's a page turner. But you can get a lot of things out of the book because it has a lot of practical advice or practical values. For example, it emphasizes that one of the most overlooked sentences in the Bible or teachings of Christ from the Bible is that the kingdom of God is within you. When you have challenges in life, you should look inside for answers. Look inside and follow your intuition, follow your gut feelings when you have difficulties to decide one way or another. Also, it tells you how to improve your health from a different perspective. So there are a lot of things in the book that are gems or practical advice that can give you a lot of values. Actually, reading the book has been my best investment in my entire life.
That is a really high praise for a book, and so I do hope a lot of people do check it out. I'm going to personally check it out and look through it. And I just remembered a thought that I was going to ask you earlier in the episode when we were talking about reincarnation, and my mind just reminded me, and that is, in your opinion, why do some people believe past lives are possible but reincarnation isn't? And vice versa, saying, oh, reincarnation is possible, but there's no such thing as a past life. To me, you can't have one without the other. But I'm curious if you've come across that and your thoughts behind that.
I agree with you. They have to coexist in order to make sense, common sense. We constantly evolve spiritually through the different reincarnations. Actually, the author Michel was taken into his past lives. He was shown his past lives. So in each of his past lives, he had a different spiritual lesson to learn. And we do that all the time too. I mean, we evolve, and we actually reincarnate not only on Earth but also on different planets. Some people have young souls, some people have old souls. So this is probably why some people do not realize that reincarnation exists. Some people immediately know from the knowledge accumulated from of their past lives that reincarnation exists. Some of them remember their past lives, especially when they were young. When they were young, they tend to remember their past lives. So it's quite evident. It's quite to me it's it's quite easy for people to know that reincarnation and past lives exist.
Thank you, and I agree. And one thing that I find that's very interesting is I've heard a lot of people talking about as we're spiritually growing and shifting that, like, we're going to do away with the Julian calendar system and return to a lunar calendar system where we'll have 12 months of 30 days. And what I find interesting is a friend, Laura Ferguson, and I were looking at this and going, Sumeria had it, the ancient Egyptians had it, all the ancient cultures had it in that region. But as I studied Chinese history, I don't know if I learned or remembered how China's calendar system works. And if we did go to a lunar system, would that more align with the Chinese calendar system? Because I know it's based on the stars, but that's about all I remember of it.
The traditional Chinese calendar system is based on the lunar system. And in the past, we had everything was documented in the lunar system. Nowadays, because of Western influence, we use both actually.
Okay, so do you think that that's going to help us spiritually, that we're going to be leaving this man-made system of time and returning to a more natural lunar time, even though I can't really say the lunar time is natural because the moon wasn't always there, so it can't really be natural.
I like to ask you, like, where did you get the information that the moon wasn't always there? Because you're absolutely right. According to the ETs, that the moon was actually captured. The moon did not exist on Earth back 1.35 million years ago. However, like I would say, I forgot the number of the exact year, but just a few thousand years ago, or maybe longer than that, moon appeared and it was captured by Earth. Um, and you can use artificial to describe the moon, because it's inherently different from Earth. However, like I would say about, oh yeah, I remember. So back about 250,000 years ago, the moon was captured, at least from that time. So they were. So where did you get the information that the moon wasn't there a long time ago?
I actually was reading some indigenous North American tribal cultural material, and there's references to when the moon arrived in some ancient Greek texts. And so that's where I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, if the ancient Greeks are the only one on the planet that said, yeah, there was a time before the moon, I'd be like, maybe that's symbolic, but the moon was really there. But when another bunch of cultural tribes on the other side of the world sit there and say, oh, there was a time before the moon, I'm like, wait a minute. We got two different sides of the equator, or not equator, but hemispheres talking about the same thing. There's got to be something to this. And so that's where I was like, okay, the moon didn't break off of the earth as we're told in science class and hasn't always been there.
Right. I didn't know about that, but you're absolutely right that the moon was not there long time ago, 1 million years ago or so. Um, and people in ancient civilizations knew about this. Yeah. So the legends, yeah, say so.
And so I'm curious, as you mentioned the moon was captured and brought here. Do you think that it's a piece of another world that was destroyed that was captured and brought over, or and that's why scientists are like, there's only 8 planets in the solar system now, not 9, because we don't want the 10th planet to come because of that prophecy?
Well, the moon was a comet that was captured by Earth, um, and uh, and I would say read the book Theory of Prophecy, and you understand why there are basically 9 planets, or 8 or 9 planets revolve around a star, like our solar system, and why there are like 9 stars that revolve around a bigger star until the center of the universe. So this is actually a pattern of the universe yet to be uncovered by astronomers. Um, I would love to continue the conversation after you read the book.
Yes, and I'm glad I didn't read the book because I feel like a lot of my questions might have been skewed differently, and so.
Yeah,
Uh, but yes, I'll definitely will do that, and I'm gonna take a moment and see. While I'm looking something up to share with everyone,
yeah.
do you mind? Do you have a message or anything that you'd like to share with everyone that you would hope that they would take away from this and maybe inspire them to do some more research into this?
Yes, the ETs tell us that the number one danger on Earth is money. So as you see in this commercial world, everything revolves around money. So if you have a way to cure cancer, but if a company cannot make money out of it, the company will have no incentive to promote such method to cure cancer. Instead, they would tend to develop uh, pharmaceuticals that would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to really treat the symptoms of cancer and not necessarily cure it. Because the companies will not be able to make money because they have to serve the interests of their shareholders. So are the defense companies. They have to serve the interests of their shareholders in order uh, to I mean they have to create divisions in the world and to sell their weapons and to create conflicts. So in the education industry as well, in the legal industry as well. so so everywhere. So people have to have the knowledge to really kind of realize that we can empower ourselves with the right information and facts. So this book opens people's eyes and enlightens people with the right knowledge. I really believe that knowledge is power because it can empower us to make the right decisions in our life.
I agree. And what I did was I went into your bio and copied the name of the author and the book title. And so I have it on the bottom of the screen here. It's also in the description for this episode. So anyone who's watching, this is the book that we're keep referencing and the author's name. And so where can people find this book? Is it on your website or is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon and also on Audibles as an audiobook read by a very good narrator.
Okay. And so if people have questions to you or want to understand more about this, is there a place that you would prefer they reach out to you and talk to you about it?
I would prefer they reach out to me on LinkedIn uh, or on Facebook.
Okay.
That's social
Wow.
media. Yeah.
I didn't even know you were on Facebook. I found you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And so his LinkedIn, I do believe, is in the description. So you can reach in there. And I can personally say that he does respond rather quickly. So, and if not, he'll explain why. And so don't, message him and then think he's ignoring you if he doesn't get right back to you. Is and so that's why I wanted to mention that is we talk on LinkedIn every once in a while, and so he does respond. So don't feel ignored if you don't get a response in a day. Is he will respond? That I can guarantee you.
Yes, I do respond.
Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your information with us. And I have just one last message from me and my show to you, Samuel, and that is from my heart and the heart of my shows to you. Thank you for what you're doing for humanity. It is seen and it is appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
And do you have anything coming up that you want to promote or any projects coming up?
I'll be speaking at the Ozark UFO conference in Arkansas in April, and also speaking at the Canadian UFO conference in October. So those are my upcoming appearances.
Wow, that's really cool. So if you're in those areas, go check it out. His presentation is very interesting and very well presented. I was amazed at the connections that he was making and was able to show them. So if you get a chance, do check it out. And thank you again for coming on and being a guest on my show. I know when given opportunities, we all view it with a little scrutiny and like to vet each other because you never know what's going to happen. So thank you for trusting me and coming on, and I greatly appreciate it. And hopefully, we'll have you on again.
Great, thank you.
And with that, we're going to say goodnight, everyone. Have a wonderful day and rest of the week. And depending where you are in the world, make it safe because the weather is coming. And I don't want to go into the quote unquote, what was that TV show? Oh, it was on HBO. Game of Thrones with the winter is coming scenario. So thank you all and have a wonderful night. Excuse me. With that, good night, everyone.
Bye bye.